The lost zoo in a Cardiff park that drew crowds from all over with its exotic animals today. Victoria Park is one of Cardiff's most popular green spaces and a haven for dogwalkers, who take their four-legged friends on a stroll through the picturesque park whatever the weather. Aside from a few canine pals and the odd pigeon or squirrel, however, the park isn't exactly teeming with exotic creatures. But in the early 20th century, it was home to a zoo that drew in crowds from all over the city and even further afield, with many people seeing creatures they had never heard of for the first time. While it is now best known for its popular splash pad and legendary local characters, the Canton Park was the place to be in the early 1900s, with the collection of animals at the zoo expanding rapidly during its 40-year history. One of its most popular former residents has even been immortalized in a statue in the park, as well as inspiring a well-known folk song. Read more. The remarkable past of Cardiff's St. Mary Street, where people were burnt at the stake and even drowned in the sea. Plans for the zoo were first conceived while Queen Victoria was still on the throne, with work to construct a small aviary beginning in late 1900. The following year, the first residents, 2 bantam storks, moved in, and the collection began to grow rapidly from there due largely to Cardiff's position as a busy seaport, with sea captains bringing gifts from faraway lands. A small African monkey was next to arrive, while other early donations included an ostrich, raccoons, 3 gazelles and a tortoise. The animals came from all over the world, with owls arriving from South America and Australia, while a mountain sheep that was presented in 1905 hailed from southern Pakistan. By 1908, there were nearly 60 birds and mammals in the zoo, with new dens built to house them all and an official zoo attendant appointed a few years later. While many of them were small and relatively low maintenance, some bigger beasts soon arrived in Canton, including an Amazon alligator, 2 crocodiles and several birds of prey. The First World War had a big impact on the zoo's future. While it led to some new animals being given a home there, namely regimental mascots including 3 goats and a raven, a shortage of food caused by the war saw many resident animals dispersed to other sites. While the zoo remained a popular fixture for many years and welcomed even more animals, including seals, parrots and even a polar bear cub, it never fully recovered during the post-war period. By the 1930s, it was in a neglected condition, with far fewer animals and birds than it had boasted in its early days. Part of the collection had been destroyed when the River Ely burst its banks, with a fox reportedly drowning in a flood in the park in early 1918. While many of the animals were moved to safety, others are not thought to have survived. Ultimately, in 1941, the zoo was disbanded, with the chief officer reporting that he had moved the animals and birds out of the park for the sum of £4, with suggestions that the majority were transferred to Bristol Zoo. A new playground was developed on the former site of the zoo a decade later, although there are still reminders of what came before it in the park today. While many animals lived in Victoria Park Zoo over the years, few are remembered as fondly as Billy the seal, who first arrived in the park in 1912 having reportedly been caught in trawler nets off the Irish coast. Billy, along with another seal, was officially presented to Cardiff Council in 1914, with Parks Committee minutes from that year detailing the construction of a proposed pond for them both to live. A suitable site was eventually found near the lake in the park. A saltwater environment other seals were added to the mammals, but did not survive for long, and so it is assumed they were living in fresh water instead. Although a popular resident at the zoo, Billy soon became expensive. While Cardiff trawler company Neil and West was initially supplying fish for the seal free of charge, it was unable to continue doing this after the breakout of the First World War. During this time, it was reported that the cost of feeding Billy each week was £1.14, around £85 today. This expense led the Parks Committee to discuss whether the seal should remain in Canton or be returned to the sea. Luckily for Billy's fans, it was decided that the popular resident could stay in the park, but was put on half rations until a local fishmonger began to supply fish free of charge once again. Adly, Billy died in April 1939. It was only after this point that it was discovered she was female, with many believing before her death that she was male. Her skeleton is preserved at the National Museum Wales in Cardiff, while she also inspired local folk singer Frank Hennessy to pen a song about she was fed kippers and Brain's dark beer. To make sure Billy was not forgotten, a sculpture commemorating her life was unveiled in the park in 1997, next to her old home, which today is the very